To the bill, I want to be very clear. This is a good piece of legislation. Even Breonna Taylor's attorney agrees and has said this is a well-crafted and well-drafted bill. It effectively bans no-knock warrants in the state of Kentucky. Good. We have that in Louisville. We need to do that in the rest of the state. We've spent a lot of time talking about no-knock warrants, and that's important. We'll continue that conversation. But this is the low-hanging fruit. We're having this discussion today because a young woman was killed in a botched police raid. Let's say her name, Breonna Taylor. And let's be clear that the problems of systemic racism didn't start for Breonna Taylor when the police knocked on her door. It was the culmination of events and circumstances put in place hundreds of years ago. The senator from Jefferson 33 stood up and he said, "Why do people say we're always talking about race?" Well, it was Arthur Schlesinger who famously wrote that race is the thread that runs true through all of American history. We cannot ignore that 400 years ago, people were brought here in boats, in chains. That our country was founded in irony. It began with a declaration that everyone is created equal and everyone is divinely endowed with inalienable rights, but also with the adoption of a government run by white property-owning men in which slaves were treated as property and counted as 3/5 of a person. The senator from Scott referenced his relatives who fought for the Union in the Civil War. Yes, let's recognize that 100 years after the formation of this country, we fought a bloody war in which hundreds of thousands of Americans were killed so that we could finally determine that Black people would be free. But let's not romanticize what happened next. We didn't free the slaves. We fired them by writing so much of our discriminatory past into our new laws. Think about it. We told an entire race of people where they couldn't live through redlining practices. We made it legal for banks to discriminate in their lending practices, leading to disparities in generational wealth still evident today. We told Black people where they could eat, where they could stay. White people never had to know what it meant to be a sundown town, just as white parents today don't have to give their kids the talk. We even dictated where Black people could sit on a bus, where they could drink water, and yes, where they could go to school. When the University of Kentucky won its first national championship, its doors were closed to Black students. This was the law. I can't offer a complete history of racism in the time we have today, but hopefully this offers a glimpse into how we came to have structural and systemic racism, not through the divine rights guaranteed in our Constitution, but through man-made systems. The senator from Marshall said, let's look at the facts of this case. So let's look at them. A young woman with no drugs, no money found in her apartment, was at home, alone, unarmed, with her boyfriend at 1 o'clock in the morning. And she was shot dead. We can say all we want to about how that happened, why that happened. 2 of the officers involved in the raid have been fired for their conduct that night. 1 has been indicted for his conduct that night on criminal charges. But I can tell you one fact we didn't mention about that case. That would have never happened in my neighborhood. That warrant never would have been served in my neighborhood. I bet if we do a survey right now, how many no-knock warrants have been served in the entire districts of many of the people in this Senate. It happened to her. Let's say her name, Breonna Taylor. Now, Senate Bill 4 deals with the structural inequities she saw that night. It begins to chip away at them. Again, it's a good bill. It's a good step. Senate Bill 80, filed by the senator from Marshall, is another good step. It prohibits bad actors from avoiding the consequences of their actions simply by retiring. But we need to do more. We need to reimagine policing in ways that include effective civilian oversight, more transparency, community policing, how we enforce certain drug laws. You know, we also need to look at better recruitment, better training, better pay. Many of these proposals are included in Senate Bill 283, filed by the senator from Jefferson from 33. They're also in a House bill named for Breonna Taylor. These bills should be heard too. And in this good conversation we've had today, we can't just hit around the edges of these problems. We must go to the core of what's wrong. It's at least as urgent, if not more so, that we attack the sources of endemic violent crime, concentrations of cyclical poverty, inaccessible health care, inadequate housing, failed educational efforts, underfinanced social services, systemic racism, and paucities of opportunity. Senate Bills 100 and 125, filed by the senator from Clay and the senator from Jefferson 33, present a wonderful step in this direction. Senate Bill 10, filed by the senator from Greene, is a great opportunity for us to find legislative solutions and finally structuralize equity instead of inequity. Yep, the events of the last year, including Breonna Taylor's tragic death, are forcing this conversation. But let's be honest, the problems have always been there. Our words here today, even the passage of a few bills, won't erase the tragic paradox that darkens the American story. Continued enlightened stewardship, however, can change the narrative. Simply put, we can't stop. This is not the end. We are the stewards of the founders' most important promise. And now, more than ever, we must go forward